All right, welcome to the Def Diary 71, the Adams Update Part 2. Let's get right into it, shall we? As we're going to be talking about patch notes today. First of all, this Tuesday, May 9th, the release of 1.6 on the 1-year anniversary of the Stellaris release. Serious hype. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great. Safe games from 1.5 should be fine to be continued in 1.6, but of course, as always, if you are running into any problems, you can just roll back the game to 1.5 and continue your journey. So, before we jump into the patch notes, Devouring Swarm. It's basically the Fnatic Purifier variant of the Hive Mind. You cannot engage in any diplomacy. Xenopops will always be eaten. You gain society research from eating Xenopops. Your ship hull points will be increased by 10%, which is pretty damn awesome. Monthly hull point generation by increased by 0.5, so you actually have regen. Army damage increased by 40%. And research speed, biology increased by 20%. Now, one thing that is to note, Xenopops will always be eaten in 1.5. That was always the default. Right now, you will have the ability, at least in 1.6, to expel populations so you don't have to consume them. So that's at least a cool thing. Then, terraforming enhancements. You will be able to terraform planets that are already colonized through the new ecological adaptation technology, which is pretty awesome. It also kills all native species, I think, at least all pre-sentient pops. So that's cool. And additionally, slight adjustments to World Shaper. When it's taken, you will instantly get atmospheric manipulation technology. So you'll be able to jump onto the terraforming hype train pretty early on, which is quite useful for those tall playing empires. And now, without further ado, the patch notes. Expansion features, Devouring Swarm, we talked about that. And it is now possible to find and repair ruined megastructures within the galaxy. It's also possible for, if you are playing Utopia, you can find any megastructures. If you're playing the vanilla game, or without Utopia at least, you can still find ring worlds and fix those with the mega engineering technology. Possible to repair ruined ring worlds, as we already discussed. Rework the Empire Diplomacy to get 16 additional rooms. Cool. Replace growth time modifier effect with growth speed and rebalance rated values. So growth time is completely out of here and has now been replaced with growth speed. So that's now a thing there. This is a big one. Added the ability to drain sector resource stockpiles, giving you a 75% of their stockpile resources at the cost of 100 influence. 100 influence is pretty expensive, but the cost is reduced to 25% influence during defensive wars. So sectors may now actually be a little bit more useful than they used to be. It is now possible to terraform inhabited planets. Yep. You can now set taxes for energy credits and minerals separately. And Iron Man autosaving is now quarterly instead of monthly. So every 3 months instead of every month. Humans are now adaptive, nomadic, and wasteful instead of quick lingers and nomadic. This is just for the prefab species. The cost of species modification projects is now based on the difference between the traits at the start and the end of the modification, rather than on the sum of the trait costs. Interesting. So it could be lasting a bit longer or shorter depending on how you execute this. The Praetorian Scourge Crisis will now show up more often and the Unbidden less often. There was a bug before which basically caused the Unbidden to spawn a lot more. This had to do with the Fallen Empires having jump drive technology and the game not taking into account the fact that they had those. That is a thing. More than doubled the base strength of the Praetorian Scourge invasion fleet, so they will be pretty strong. Same thing for the extra dimensionals, so the Unbidden will now spawn with 80,000 fleet power on their initial fleets. The power of Crisis fleets have now been scaled to the galaxy. Same thing goes for Fallen and Awakened Empires. Certain common anomalies will no longer spawn repeatedly, so like swirling shadows, I would guess in this particular case. It is no longer be possible to see technologically enlightened fanatic xenophobes. So if you're primitive and you hate everybody, you can no longer be enlightened technology-wise. Choosing the religious awakening and old gods will shift your empire's ethics towards spiritualists rather than completely replacing all your ethics to spiritualists. Cool. Increased warp time, wind down time, which means that warp will now be slower. Charismatic and repugnant now only impacts opinion of other empires. Okay. Pups that are freed from slavery in the caste system will now have lingering unhappiness of being made slaves in the first place. Delicious Titans will now give you plus 50% food instead of 100. It was overpowered as hell. You could have like planets with like 300 food on it. It was pretty crazy. Hive minds can now choose to eat Titanic life. I would hope so. World Shaper Ascension perk now unlocks terraforming tech. Master Builder's Ascension perk now increases megastructure build speed by 100% instead of a 30% reduction or a 30% build speed increase. I think it was 33 actually. Terraforming related technologies are now less rare, so you can do terraforming a lot more. Planetary Survey Core, this is a big one, gives you 1/10 of the monthly research, but a minimum of 3 instead of 1/3. So this was part of the Discovery tradition tree. Planetary Survey Core was incredibly overpowered and would boost your technology into the heavens based on, you know, these sort of things. So it's no longer the case anymore, however. Reduced likelihood of enclaves and space monsters spawning within player borders. Okay. Xeno Outreach agenda weights have been changed. So Xeno Outreach, that's just the Xenophiliacs. Basically, their agendas have been changed. All consumer goods are now paid on an empire level to make it more clear to the player what the costs are incurred by living standards. That's very useful. Megastructure demands rejected modifiers set up to 7,200 days. Withdrawal effects from Chemical Bliss are now less severe and do not last as long. Extra dimensionals turn planets barren after destroying colonies. This is a huge friggin' deal. Before, it would go for a tag you're it sort of situation, where it would purge the population, but you could still colonize the world. Now it turns into a barren world, which is terrifying. It can completely annihilate all living space in like a quarter of the galaxy. That is huge. Extra dimensionals now turn barren after destroying colonies. That's amazing. Sensor Tech now increases planetary sensor range rather than survey speed. Bit annoying. Survey is going to be a little bit longer to do, which in combination with the Planetary Survey Core is going to cause some problems. Automated survey protocols now provide 50% survey speed, up from 15%. So it's probably to offset the Sensor Tech technology. Reduce the distance on which xenophobic fallen empires are angered by frontier outposts. Interesting. Interesting. So you can reduce distance at which... So you can put frontier outposts closer? Okay. Corporate Dominion Civic no longer required to be egalitarian. Leviants will no longer occasionally spawn right. That we have already discussed this. Spiritualist Fallen Empire no longer upset by colonizing Tomb Worlds. That's a good thing, because it was really annoying before. Upgrade transport ships now are instant and at no cost. That's nice. So if you want to change your drop ships from warp to say jump drive, you can instantly do it for free. Ships got an FTL magnets no longer warp in right on top of the station, but rather near it, so it won't die instantly. Boosted the damage output of military stations and frontier outposts substantially. So military stations and outposts are now a bit more viable. Increased the distance at which military stations have to be built from each other, so less stations in the system. Boosted the outputs of the Psi Nexus from 30 to 60 to 90. 90 science is a huge deal. Even though for, what, like 45,000 minerals? It's acceptable. Habitat solar processors can no longer be built in a system with at least a half-built Dyson sphere. So the Habitat solar processors are buildings that generate plus 10 energy for a habitat. Through solar energy, of course, if the Dyson sphere is in the way, it can no longer generate solar power, so that would be a problem. It is now possible for Fnatic Xenophobe Spiritualists to be Fnatic Purifiers. That is awesome. Legion of Strength of Legion Civics now adds a minus 20% army upkeep. That makes perfect sense. Faction issues have been remixed with multiple new and retuned demands. That is awesome. Right now, factions are a bit of an issue to work with. Here's the big one. Increase the effect of promoting an ethic to 100% attraction. This means that flipping an empire's ethics will be a lot easier from this moment onwards, or at least from Tuesday onwards. Fallen empires can spawn slightly further away from other empires. Removed influence costs from Fleet Academy Spaceport module. This is a huge deal. The Fleet Academy Cost 100 influence to build, excluding its mineral cost. And of course, the station slot. Having a fleet academy in pretty much every single station is going to increase the power of your fleet substantially. Guardians of Zanan are now a little bit more difficult to defeat. They were easy before anyway. I hope they actually spawn now. There's now a 30-day cooldown on insults. Homeworld habitability is plus 30 instead of always being 100. Colonial centralization is now a tier 2 tech, which means that we'll get colonial buildings a little bit later. No longer possible to trade away systems at war. I can see how this would be an issue in multiplayer. Galactic administration and number of technologies depending on it are now tier 3 techs. They used to be tier 2, I believe. So that's now a bit more expensive. Pre-FTL civilizations will no longer achieve FTL within the first 25 years of the game. Okay. Remove weapons from mining and research stations. Thank God my fleets will no longer engage them anymore. That's nice. It also means that they will be extremely vulnerable to pirates at the start of the game. Adopting domination will now give you a 20-point bonus to acceptance on diplomatic subjugation actions. So it'll be easier to vassalize somebody. Properly completing the Enigmatic Fortress event chain now yields a random enigmatic technology rather than all of them. I hope that you don't get the enigmatic fields or any of the encoders and decoders. You get the shields and the power because those are the only ones that are worthwhile. Yeah, you can get really boned by this if you don't watch out. And the video is still accurate, so it doesn't really matter. Hive Minds will now get a 25% pop growth speed. That's crazy. Plus a 10% habitability bonus. Each tradition group will now add a plus 10% cost to tradition adaptation costs. That's great. Right now you can rush through the tradition tree way too quickly. Terraforming technology is now more common. Nice. Pups will now only voluntarily migrate away from planets that are heavily crowded. So the more pups you have on it, the easier they'll migrate away. Finite Purify Civics now also increases xenophobic attraction, and the same goes for Materialist at the Mechanics Civic. Cool. Buildings. Symbol of Unity is gone. There's a whole bunch of buildings that have their happiness and food modifiers removed for the sake of Unity. Also, it looks like there's a ton of buildings that have their happiness bonuses reduced, so unrest is going to be a bigger problem within the game. Like Cultural Center, Loop Institute, clinics, Paradise Dome, Peace Festivals, Champion of the People, they all have their happiness bonuses reduced. And a bunch of other buildings like the Dragon Monument, Shrine, and Satellite Trophy give buildings with 50% Unity output, which is pretty crazy. Habitats are now a little bit better at mineral production. Okay, cool. Then there's a bunch of AI stuff, interface stuff. Outliner now sorts civilian ships according to ship class, so you'll have all the science ships and all the construction ships in their own little section. Let's take a look here. Anything interesting here? You can now see who's rivaling an empire in a diplomatic view. That's useful. Planets now show the max number of garrisoned armies, which is quite useful. Added an alert for inactive civics and unspent civic points. That is amazing. Added a map mode for hyperlanes. Added a track all button for special projects, which is amazing. Terra Incognita is now consistently applied to all map modes. Fixed the 4-digit fleet capacity issue. Okay, White Pace offers are now clearly labeled as such. The option to control shift clicking and then sending 1,000 resources into a trade deal. That's nice. Added a map mode that displays which empires are considered neighbors. That's useful as well, especially with some of the demands from factions. Fix an animation bug fleet causing it to slide in and out of the screen. I've never seen that before. And of course, the most important of all, the slavery purge sound are now played appropriately when species rights are set. And that is pretty much it in terms of the bug fixes. There's obviously a whole bunch of them. We're going to go and put that in the comments below. But in the meantime, yeah, it comes out on May the 9th. Tuesday on the 1-year anniversary of the game coming out, which is exciting times. I'm gonna be at PDXCon next week. Would not be surprised if they're gonna be announcing a new expansion for the game there. So we'll see whether or not what's gonna happen with that. In the meantime, until next time, I hope this was useful to you. And if you feel like this is something you want to see more of, feel free to hit that subscribe button, and the like and dislike button is down there as well. So until next time, take good care of yourselves and, of course, each other.